friends, it's Becky here. Thanks for coming to visit. Today we're making quarantine cookies. A lot of us want and need cookies in our lives right now, but we don't have the right ingredients. So today we're going to make our cookies out of anything we can find in our cupboards. Here are the ingredients for your cookie base. 2 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour, or a mix of any flours you have in your cupboard. 1 teaspoon baking soda, 1 teaspoon of salt, 3/4 teaspoons if your butter is salted, 2 sticks of butter, soft but not warm, 3/4 cups of granulated sugar, 1 cup of dark brown sugar, packed. We'll talk substitutions in a minute. 2 eggs, 1 1/2 to 2 cups of stuff. Here's my pretty green mixer again. She's going to be helping me out today. You can still do this recipe with a bowl, a spoon, and elbow grease. I'm going to put my butter, sugar, and dark brown sugar into the mixing bowl. When measuring brown sugar, it's important not to just scoop the cup measure. We're also going to press the sugar down to make sure it's really filling the cup. This is what I mean by packed. I'm going to put on my paddle attachment and get it all creaming together on speed 2. So, the creaming method. We're beating our butter and sugar together and incorporating air into our mix as we do so. You'll notice our mixture is going through stages. The first is the wet sand stage. After that comes the clumpy stage. It turns kind of into a ball that swirls around the bowl. And the final stage is when everything finally starts getting fluffy. All in all, this process can take about 3 to 5 minutes. While we let our mixer do its thing, let's talk sugar. What is brown sugar? When sugarcane or sugar beets are being processed, their juices are then boiled. It helps to separate the sugar crystals from the molasses. The sugar crystals are then refined and made into your household sugar. Brown sugar, depending on the manufacturer, is either allowed to keep some of its original molasses, or the molasses will be added back in later on in the process. White granulated sugar. It's loose. So when we go to cream it with our butter, it's going to help incorporate air into our mix. Light and dark brown sugars clump, so these big, beautiful air bubbles aren't forming. Don't get me wrong, there are still air bubbles, but there are fewer and they're much smaller. But the brown sugar in this recipe isn't just for flavor, it's that molasses. It makes our sugar acidic. And if you remember, there's baking soda in our recipe. So that means when the baking soda works with the acidity of the brown sugar, a smaller version of the 6th grade volcano experiment happens. So here's the deal when it comes to substitutions. Don't have dark brown sugar? That's totally okay. If you have light brown sugar, that will work just fine, and you can add a tablespoon of molasses to darken it if you have it on hand. Don't have either. You can replace it with 1 cup of white sugar and 2 tablespoons of molasses. If you don't have molasses, use maple syrup instead. But maple syrup isn't as acidic as molasses. You'll want to do 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda and 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. Don't have either of those, just use white sugar. You'll want to replace all of the baking soda with baking powder though to get that cakey rise. Now that we're nice and fluffy, we're going to turn our mixer off and scrape our bowl down. We're about to add the eggs, and we want to make sure that all the bits clinging to the walls have a chance to get in on this egg party that's about to happen. I'm going to crack my eggs into a separate container that isn't my mixer. According to Jacques Pepin, cracking the egg on a flat surface helps prevent any bacteria from the shell getting into the whites and yolk of your egg. It also lessens your chance of getting bits of shell in your bowl or your yolk breaking, which is super important if you're separating your eggs, and it doesn't leave that trail of egg on the side of your bowl. We're adding the eggs one at a time. Once the one goes in, we're going to let it swim around until it joins the air bubble, butter, sugar party. Then we're going to scrape our mix down and let the second egg join its friends. Our eggs are going to help bind everything together in our cookie dough. We'll let them get nice and fluffy, and then, you guessed it, we're going to scrape it down again. This one's important. We're about to add our dry ingredients, and we want to make sure that our flour gets a chance to hug all its friends in the bowl. Unmixed butter ribbons will lead to your butter leaching out when you bake your cookies. Here are my dry ingredients. My flour, baking soda, salt, plus I snuck in 2 tablespoons of cocoa powder, just because I'm sad I don't have chocolate chips. It's not going to give me a strong chocolatey taste, but it'll add a little oomph. We can whisk these together. If you don't have a whisk, use a fork. Everything is going to be okay. I'm going to dump half of this mix into my bowl. We're going to mix till things get shaggy, not incorporated. I want to see flour still. I'm going to take my 2 cups of stuff. These are things that have been buried in my cupboard for a long time. I found different kinds of chocolate truffles that I chopped up. There's also some dry roasted peanuts, pumpkin seeds, and I threw in some cereal for good measure. I'm going to put these into what remains of my flour, and I'm going to toss them lightly. It's going to help suspend them in my mix and distribute these goodies a little more evenly through our cookie dough. We're going to mix them until just combined. We don't want to overmix our cookies. I like to finish this process by hand, just to be safe. Literally, by hand. I like getting my hands dirty. There's a little bit of dry ingredients sitting at the bottom of the bowl, so I'm gonna make sure they're well incorporated throughout our cookie, and then, ta-da! Now we're gonna scoop the dough. You'll need a sheet tray with tin foil, parchment, wax paper, or naked. This is just where we're gonna land our cookies, not bake them. Here I have a yellow-handled ice cream scoop. It's about 1.63 ounces, but these are your cookies, so you get to use whatever scoop you want. If you don't have a scoop, you can use 2 spoons to drop our cookie dough down. For those of us spooning our dough, we're going to want to give them about 5 to 10 minutes in the fridge, and then we can roll them in between our hands. The fridge time gives them a chance to firm up, so it's less likely to stick to our hands. If you use an ice cream scoop for your cookies, you can skip this step. Then we're going to stick them back in the fridge for about 30 minutes. This will give them a chance to firm up before we decide on how to store them. Now that they've had a chance to firm up and keep their shape a little better, we're going to store our cookies in Tupperware. Be sure not to pile too many in one container as you'll squish them. You'll want to keep your cookie dough in the fridge overnight. But why? 2 reasons. We're giving the butter a chance to firm up again, so our cookies don't just spread as soon as they hit the heat of the oven. And you know how soup always tastes better the next day? Same goes for cookies. It gives the flavors a chance to marry a little, giving you a more flavorful, robust cookie. If you don't want to eat all these cookies right away, you can stick the cookie dough in the freezer. To use them, move them into the refrigerator the night before to defrost, then continue on with our usual baking instructions. What are our usual baking instructions? Great question. We can set our oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. We're going to put our cookies onto our sheet tray. My last bit of dough made a baby cookie and I just couldn't resist sticking it in there to bake. We're going to space them out to give them room to spread, about 1 to 2 inches apart. I'm going to press them down slightly to get them started, and I'm going to tuck them into the oven for 10 minutes. After the 10 minutes, we're going to take inspiration from Sarah Kiefer, the original queen of the pan bangers. We're going to take our cookie tray, give it a solid 2 taps, and spin it around in the oven and give our cookies another 5 to 7 minutes. The banging will help make little ripples in our cookies, helping the edges get crispy and the center gooey. If you want more information on Sarah, I've put the link for her cookies in the YouTube video description. Let's say you prefer your cookies more cakey and less crispy. You can also skip the pan banging. It's your kitchen, so make your cookies your way. Once they're ready to come out of the oven, we'll give them another 2 quick bangs and let them cool off on their sheet trays. We may or may not still eat them while they're warm. I can't wait to hear about your creations. Enjoy!